Mr. Lamont, last week a controversy erupted when Henry Parker, the former state treasurer, endorsed you along with the Connecticut Federation of Black Democratic Clubs, and then directly challenged Senator Lieberman's record on civil rights, questioned whether he had even gone to work in the South in the 1960s for civil rights. You said the next day that you were taken surprised by those comments and you disassociated yourself with them. But Mr. Lamont, you were standing right there when Mr. Parker made those remarks. If they were wrong, why didn't you speak up at that point?
It was last week we were endorsed by a leading civil rights organization in the state of Connecticut endorsing our campaign. And during that endorsement, I was proud to receive their endorsement. They're leading black leaders from across the state. Over the course of that endorsement, one of the supporters stood up and made some comments that I didn't understand. I didn't know what they meant. And I thought they were wrong. And I said that immediately. We issued a press release immediately. I disassociate from that. And Senator, I apologize for those comments. They weren't my comments, but they're not the tone of this campaign. It's not the tone I want for politics in the state of Connecticut. But that was 40 years ago. I think now is the time for us to talk about the 21st century, talk about civil rights, and talk about the affirmative job we have to keep doing to make sure there's equal opportunity for all people. We should have a good old-fashioned debate about affirmative action, whether there's still a place for affirmative action in 21st century America, which I think there is. Rather than looking back to the old dispute in the 1960s, let's look forward.
Ricky, this just is another example of the ridiculous bickering that's gone on in this campaign that has just taken everyone's attention off the ball. You know, when you start talking about bringing in the likes of Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson, and both of these gentlemen have basically pandered to try to get their support, these are the type of things that happen. There's nothing worse for debate, for good, honest debate, than bringing in divisive individuals into our state. I have not done that. I have tried to keep the ball right here with the people of Connecticut, because there's no room in my campaign for a Jesse Jackson. There's no room in my campaign for an Al Sharpton. There's only room in my campaign for people who care about other people, no matter what race they are. I don't support any individual or individuals or candidates that try to be divisive and try to use race baiting. And if you think that Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson are not guilty of both those two, you have a very, very limited memory. My memory does go back more than 1 or 2 years. And ladies and gentlemen, it's repulsive to me to see this even in this debate. I will never be part of it, and I hope you'll consider that when you're making a decision this year, because the United States Senate is so important. We are facing some of the most difficult pressures in our United States history right now. And whether or not either Ned Lamont or Joe Lieberman is bent on race is not the issue. They probably both have good civil rights positions and records. I am the same way. That is not the question here. The question is, what are we going to do about Social Security? What are we going to do about Medicare? What are we going to do about health care that's going to bankrupt our system? What are we going to do about our troops in Iraq and the political solution that's inevitable? What are we going to do about the madman Ahmadinejad who has designs on killing everyone in this room? That is the fundamental question. We all believe in civil rights. Let's just wipe that out of this campaign and move on to something that's more important.
Well, I actually think that Alan's made a good point there, and I appreciate it. I thank Ned for his apology, and I appreciate that too. The comments that Henry Parker made on paper that was paid for by the Lamont campaign, maybe drafted by somebody in the campaign, I don't know, was outrageous. It was just the latest in a series of outrageous misstatements of fact about my life. I'd ask you to think about an apology for some of the other distortions that your campaign is putting out on me. You know that I have not supported the Bush administration's Social Security privatization program. And yet you're spending a lot of your own money to send out pamphlets, mailers to senior citizens in this country, scaring them. Joe Lieberman was George Bush's point man on Social Security privatization. I challenge you to come up with a single vote, letter, or anything else. The record shows that I've been against it throughout the entire Bush administration. And I hope you'll stop it, and we can get on to some of the things that really matter, like our security, like fixing our healthcare system, like energy independence. I'm for Social Security. It's probably the best thing that the federal government has ever done. If it were not in existence, half of the seniors in America would live below the poverty level. I'm never going to do damage to Social Security. I thought about privatization in the 90s. When I looked at it, because I look at new ideas, I concluded it was a terrible idea. It would weaken Social Security and not benefit the seniors. And ever since then, throughout the Bush administration, I've been against it. So I'm not been for it, but Lord knows I've not been the Bush point man. So I ask your apology for that and to stop that nonsense, and let's talk about some positive ideas that you have. I'm counting about 4 or 5 attacks on me so far.
Any other candidates?
That's the mindset.
I would like to say this. You have a record, you have an 18-year record, and that's what we discussed in a race like this. You're right, during your DLC in the 90s, you were on board supporting privatization. And when you ran for President of the United States, you were against it. Then last year in the Hartford Current, you said private accounts, great, let's put that on the table. You're not going to have any doubt with Ned Lamont. You're going to know right where I stand when it comes to Social Security. It's something you earned. It's going to be there to keep. We're not going to let anybody take that away. President Bush has said privatizing Social Security is going to be back on the table soon in the new administration. You're going to have to know where everybody stands. You know where Ned Lamont stands.
And, excuse me, you may not want to acknowledge it, but the people of Connecticut know where Joe Lieberman stands for Social Security and against privatization. That's a fact. You have to talk.
Let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I'll tell you where both of these gentlemen stand. They stand for Social Security and Medicare bankruptcy. That's where they stand. Because again, for one idea, I call them the United States Senate the Ostrich Club. Do you know why I call them the Ostrich Club? Because they stick their head in the sand and they hope. They just hope something good's going to come of it. But you know what the truth is? It is the greatest iceberg that this nation is facing. Right now, our ship is headed for it, and these two are arguing over who gets the best deck chair to watch the crash. Well, ladies and gentlemen, someone's got to grab the helm. Someone's got to grab the wheel. And first, you have to understand the problem. The problem is we have this demographic baby boom that's about to hit. And in all due respect, Joe, I saw a comment that you made on Social Security that said something to the effect that we have a long-term imbalance in our government books. Boy, if that isn't the most understatement I've ever heard in my life. I'm going to tell you, let's cut to the chase here. Social Security and Medicare are so underfunded that they make the national debt look like a little walk in the park. It's like a drop in the bucket compared to the unfunded liability. Now, we can remain in the Ostrich Club, as Mr. Lieberman has for the last 18 years, hasn't talked about any solutions. Or we can explain to the people what we're facing. And then we can do something very novel. We can actually offer some solutions. Now, Mr. Lamont, he'll attack privatization. But what is more disingenuous than to say, well, putting some money aside for the future is worse than putting no money aside for the future, which is the current practice. And I'll tell you what's so bad about this. It's bad enough that they don't put any money aside in the Social Security Trust Fund, not a dime. They use it all to balance the general fund. But what is so disingenuous is that then, after they spend the money, and they can only do this in Washington, by the way. You never get away with this at Enron even. But they actually spend it, and then they pretend it's still there. They say, oh, this year $170 billion that came in on FICA taxes that we didn't spend on our recipients. We'll spend it on Iraq, on roads, etc., lessen the deficit. They're so proud of themselves, whether it's the Congress or Bush. We're down to $245 billion in the deficit. Of course, they're using your Social Security and Medicare money to make that happen. But what they have the audacity, and only they can do this on the Potomac, is they write it down as if it's still there after they spend it. But then they're so honest about their dishonesty that they have to earn interest on top. Can you believe this? And then they say, and Joe, this is why I ran against you. I got to be honest with you. In 2000, you got up there with Mount Dora, and you said, we ought to put Social Security in a lockbox. I said, Joe, you just lost me. You drank the Kool-Aid. You're just as disingenuous as the rest of them. You want to put an IOU from Joe Lieberman in a lockbox? I'd rather have cash. When I retire, I want a check. I don't want an IOU from Joe Lieberman. for him even though he's a nice guy. Let me tell you, something's got to be done. Now, remember I told you I was going to do some novel things this campaign? I'm going to offer you a solution. What do you think about that? You don't like privatization, Ned? You don't like that, right? How about this? We actually take all the money that comes in on Social Security, and we actually do what people expect. We invest it in the future under the umbrella of Social Security. We put it in the mortgages of Americans. Real money, earning real interest, invested, Social Security Trust Fund, invested in the homes of Americans. Isn't that something we could honestly look people in the eye and say there's money put away for your future? Anything else is irresponsible, and if you work for a Enron, it's even criminal. Thank you.
Wow, okay. Let me just speak briefly. Look, let me assure any seniors or anybody who's hoping to become a senior that there is enough money in the Social Security Trust Fund for at least 35 more years to pay all your benefits. 100%. These IOUs that Alan is talking about are the surplus after the benefits are paid. The surplus is invested in U.S. Treasury notes. Several times during my career, I agree with his criticism of this practice, incidentally. Several times during my career, I voted to take Social Security off budget so it would not be mixed with the federal deficit. The problem here is that in the 6 years of the Bush administration, we went from the surpluses in our federal government of the Clinton administration, which were going to be in that lockbox, to the deficits, enormous long-term debt, now approximated to hit almost $10 trillion by 2008 at the end of the Bush administration. So the answer to stopping the IOUs in the Social Security Trust Fund is to get our government back in balance. And I voted and supported a lot of efforts to do that. The most simple and direct one is something called pay-go. Let's go back to where we were in the 90s under the Clinton administration. You got to pay for what you do. If you cut taxes or raise spending, you got to pay for it. That's the way we'll begin to get our government back in balance, not have to put those IOUs, the Treasury notes in the trust fund, and protect our children and grandchildren from an enormous tax burden just to pay interest on the debt that this administration has accumulated. That's what to do, and that's what I intend to do.
I love the opportunity to be a Democrat and tell a Republican that deficits do matter. Dick Cheney said deficits don't matter. We've gone from a surplus, we've gone to a deficit. You know, as Senator Lieberman said, right now we have enormous unfunded liabilities going out there. The best way to deal with that is start living within our means again as a country. Look what we've got. We've got 63 lobbyists for every single congressman in Washington, D.C. We have thousands of earmarks representing tens of billions of dollars. You all heard about the bridge to nowhere. You've heard about under Medicare Part D where we can't even negotiate drug prices. There's a Medicare Part D drug benefit that's hundreds of billions of dollars over budget. Here we are spending $250 million a day. Here we have the Bush-Cheney energy bill. That's an energy bill that provides for billions of dollars of subsidies to ExxonMobil. ExxonMobil, as if they need subsidies from the taxpayers of the United States of America. Yeah, we do have a fiscal imbalance out there. It's severe and it's real. It's actually unconscionable that we are leaving our kids $9 trillion in debt. $9 trillion in debt. I think you need new people in Washington, D.C., a fresh perspective. Somebody who comes from the business world. Somebody knows what it is to hit a budget, balance a budget, and deal with the real world, the dollars and cents. Right now we have a situation in Washington that's out of control. That's what I mean to change.
Indeed. Joe, in all due respect, you got to talk to Dave Walker at the Government Accountability Office, a bipartisan, nonpartisan organization. What you said is absolutely untrue. Do you know what runs out in 35 years? The phantom money. Remember I explained to you that they've got this ledger that they were honest about their dishonesty? That's what runs out in 35 years. If you don't believe me, Joe, and you're shaking your head, do you believe Alan Greenspan? Alan Greenspan, on his way out, the Federal Reserve Chief was asked this very question by a congresswoman. I don't know if she wanted to put him on the state or if she just didn't understand it. She said, Mr. Greenspan, can you explain to us how when we start needing the Social Security notes, how we access them? Now, after he danced for about 5 minutes, this was his answer. Madam Congresswoman, when we have to start going to the Social Security notes, we will have to redeem them for real notes. In other words, it's a sham. There is no money put aside for the future. It is a total accounting nightmare. Don't believe me. If you're in this audience at home, go to the GAO website. It's all explained there. Dave Walker is the controller. If you think I'm so excited about this, you should listen to him. He's telling us that Armageddon is around the corner fiscally. The truth of the matter is, Ned, you talked about this $9 trillion. I tell you, it's dwarfed by the Social Security and Medicare shortfall. And you know what? I'm not going to be the doomsayer here. Because with the miracle of compounding, we can get out of this mess. But I'm the only one of the three who has actually studied it, who maybe understands it, and is offering a solution so that we don't totally hamstring the next generation and stop payments that we promised. For Joe Lieberman to get out here today and say, don't worry, your payments are okay, well, fine. You know what that means? We'll inflate out of it, your money will be worthless, and everything will be fine. If you believe that, I've got a bridge for you, but it's located a few miles down the road in Brooklyn. It's not the truth. I'm here to tell you the truth. Joe, the American people and the people of Connecticut can handle the truth. It's time we start telling them.